Hello and welcome to Opening the Word for the 13th Sunday of Ordinary Time. In today's Gospel reading, I'd like to draw out two big points for us to consider and apply to our lives. The first major point I want to consider is what Jesus says to his apostles. He says, "Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it." Now, in these words, we find a certain principle about human life. It's something that John Paul II called the law of ecstasis, or the law of ecstasy. And the Greek word from which we get the word ecstasy, ecstasis, means to go out of oneself. And this law, this principle, is that written on the fabric of our being, God made us to go out of ourselves, to give ourselves in love to him and to the people that he's placed in our lives. In fact, at the very beginning of the Bible, we read about how we are made in the image and likeness of God. But a fascinating fact from that passage in Genesis chapter 1:26 is that God says, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness." And the idea there is that it's a hint, an early allusion to God's existence as a Trinity. Let us make man in our image and likeness. So we're made in the image not just of God in the abstract, but we're made in the image of the triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And God's very inner life as a Trinity is all about this self-giving love, where the Father gives himself in love to the Son in return pours himself out in love to the Father, and that very outpouring of love between the Father and the Son is the third person, the Holy Spirit. And we, as human persons, are made in the image and likeness of that God. We're made to live like the Trinity, and that tells us a lot. We are made for that kind of self-giving love. And that's the only place we're going to find our happiness and fulfillment in life. John Paul II often quoted a certain line from one of the teachings of Vatican II, and it was this: man finds himself only by making himself a sincere gift to others. Man finds himself only when he makes himself a gift to others. And so the idea is that when we want to really discover happiness, we really want to find our fulfillment in life, we're going to find it not by getting a great job or filling ourselves up with a lot of stuff and possessions or things from out there in this world. Nothing in this world will satisfy. We will only find ourselves when we get out of ourselves, when we go out and we live what Jesus describes here. He says, "Whoever finds his life will lose it." So whoever's seeking for themselves selfishly is never going to be satisfied. They're always going to be unhappy and restless. But whoever loses his life, whoever gives of himself for Christ's sake, to give their life to Christ, to give their life to follow God's plan, and to give their lives in service of the people that God has placed in their lives, those are the ones that are actually going to find true life. Now, the second principle I want to take comes from another line here in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 10, from today's reading. Jesus says to the apostles, "Whoever receives you receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me." The idea is that there's such a close connection between Jesus and his apostles. He's invested his authority in them, so that if you receive one of the apostles, you're receiving Jesus. And Luke's gospel shows the powerful significance of this even more. It extends the quote of Jesus and says, Jesus says, "Who receives you receives me, and whoever rejects you rejects me." Now think about the implications of this. You know, imagine in the first century, if there were some people that said, "I really love Jesus, I want a relationship with Jesus, but I don't want to have anything to do with his apostles." What would Jesus say about that? Well, if you accept the apostles, you accept Christ. But whoever rejects the apostles rejects Jesus. So imagine if someone said, "Well, I like you, Jesus, but I don't want Peter. He's too rambunctious." Well, to the extent you reject Christ, or reject Peter, you're rejecting Christ. Or if someone said, "Oh, I love you, Jesus, but I don't want to have anything to do with John. He's too beloved, the beloved disciple. I just want a relationship with you." That's not going to work. Because to the extent you reject the apostles, you reject Jesus. And that authority that Jesus gave to the apostles was handed on down throughout the centuries to their successors and their successors, to the Pope and to the bishops that we have today. And so this reading reminds us that the successors of the apostles today, those that are standing in that role as our bishops, are standing as representatives of Christ here on earth. They are endowed with his authority to teach and to lead us, and we are called to accept them, and in therefore doing that, we are accepting more fully Jesus Christ in our lives.